Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. I'm Lisa Jones, your host, and today I have with me Laura Miner. Laura is certified in Thanatology, death, dying, and bereavement through the Association for Death Education and Counseling. Dedicated to compassionate end-of-life care for over 20 years, she has been employed as a hospice worker in Santa Fe, New Mexico, on Maui, and in Honolulu, Hawaii. She is currently self-employed on Maui, and in her spare time can be found laughing out loud, writing in her journal, practicing pilates, out dancing salsa, or even dancing in her living room. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, I'm so excited to have you here. And I was trying to remember, we met, I think it was like almost a year and a half ago at Bodie B's Death Doula.
Training. Yes.
Yeah, training. That's right. And we just really hit it off. And at that time you were living in Honolulu, but since then you've come back to Maui, and now we're crossing paths at Maui Hospice, which is just so amazing.
Yes, you are courageously one of our Hospice Maui volunteers.
That's great. Right. I love it. And we just did a program this last Saturday together, which was so fun, and really educating the community about what hospice is, and handing out brochures. And we had a really fun spinning game or whatever, which the kids really loved.
I know. We were so surprised by that, but it was a game. It was kids are attracted to play, and I'm sure we sparked some great dinner time conversations around death awareness among families.
Well, that's what I was thinking. And I was thinking what a great entry point, right? Is to get the kids talking about it, and then the parents start, because that's what I saw several times, is the parents would come over as the kids were spinning the wheel. And then the parents were like, oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that about hospice, or I didn't. So I thought it was just such a great opportunity to really go out into the community and educate them.
It was wonderful. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, let's talk a little more. We were just, before we started, I was asking about, being a death doula, because that's kind of a new term that's being used more so. But talk to me about how you got started with death, and why this is your passion and your career.
Great. Yeah. Well, I was first got a crash course introduction with my mom's death. And so she died in our home, and we had hospice care come a little bit down through the illness. It was a little, early compared to how soon most people get on hospice care. But when they did come in, it was just like, oh God, now we can exhale. We had help. Because as you know, there's a lot of work to be done sometimes when someone's dying. So that was my intro. Then once you're comfortable with a situation like that, somewhat comfortable, you've had experience with it, it sort of started to just become like, I was like a magnet for it. So my 88-year-old neighbor, a friend's grandmother, a friend's daughter, she died in a car accident, so I helped with a huge memorial. Just always things around death and dying, and honoring what a sacred phase in life it is. It's just always been there.
Wow, that's amazing. So I guess it just opened that door for you because you were comfortable. I think that's one of the biggest things I've noticed in this kind of death arena is it's the people that are comfortable and the people that aren't, right? And so those of us that are tend to take on these roles in a way where the people that aren't comfortable, can then kind of connect and access this. And I want to be the first to say that probably a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have been so comfortable being in this realm. But it's just the more and more I've gotten into it, the more I'm like, oh, wow, this isn't scary at all. And not only is it not scary, but the more I embrace it, just the more alive I feel, which is kind of a interesting thing.
Yes. And that is like the coolest oxymoron with it all, is like, the more you want to live, the more you want to live fully and do what makes you feel alive, the more you take a look at something and I think it has to do with what's taken place in our culture, making it such a taboo and a stigma to talk about, that then when you do talk about it and you do bring it up with people as a natural way of conversation, mode of living, then somehow all of a sudden it's like easier to live because you're not living with these blinders that, oh, wow, I'm going to die.
Right, right. Well, that's it. The fear of death is so pervasive. And I really do think it keeps people from living full out. And I love that you talk about dancing salsa and, because I love to do a static dance here on Maui, and that's my every Wednesday night thing. And I feel, and so on Wednesdays, I see one of my hospice families. I go and sit with one of my patients. And then I go from there to dance. And I'm telling you, I dance so much more freely and openly, and I don't care how anyone perceives me on the dance floor dancing, because I am living full out, and it just makes me so much more open, which I love it so much.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a friend of mine and I, who's also into death work. She and I talk about, we use the term dancing with death.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, and it's definitely a practice of both of ours, is when you've been in a heavy situation, because it can be chaos when you're with a family who's losing someone they love. The emotions are flying. The not knowing practically how to take care of a dying body can be overwhelming. Just everything that you're exposed to at that time of life can be incredibly heavy. So when we're doing that, we're in that and enmeshed in that, and then leave. Probably what you're doing. You can dance it out. You can move. The movement helps you just kind of, okay, let this go. It's not a matter of saying it's no longer me, because it's still you. It's like, it's dancing with it. It's dancing with all of the negative emotions, the positive emotions, the joy, the sadness. It's all part of it.
Right. And it's so, I love that. I just recently, somebody was talking to me about, ducks, when they get into kind of a little bit of a squabble or whatever, and then they go their separate ways, they all flap their wings and just get that energy out of their body. And then they're like back to just, smooth sailing. And I feel like that's kind of similar to this, when you are in those heavy situations and it's, and it's really tough. It's like, yeah, go flap your wings. So whether that's dancing or running or just, walking on the earth, and, finding a way to self-nurture yourself is so important when you're involved in this heavy duty, death work. So
yeah. It is kind of funny how some people are so more prone to be near it, and like yourself. It's just kind of a phenomenon to me how I don't know, we're all kind of just brought in with some different traits, and I always think of it as kind of like ability to sit next to that a certain type of fire, because it is kind of like a fire burning when someone's dying and in the home, and some people want to be next to that fire and some people really don't, and
yeah.
you can't really, you never know who it's going to be. I've been in families, I used to always think it was mostly women that could handle it, but I've been in families where it was a son who was there for the long haul, taking care of his mom and bathing her and doing everything. And he changed my whole perspective on male female roles within it, because he did it. He was
Wow.
there.
That's great. Yeah, like you said, you never know who's really going to step up to it and hold that space for the, for the person that's dying and the family. And, and I think that's where this death doula role is so important, because our society has gotten so far away from the natural, really dying process. It seems to me like we've institutionalized it and tried to, push it behind mortuary doors and, push it away, or putting people in hospital settings, or, places where the family really doesn't take a role. So it's so important that we have people in our community like you, like me, that step into this to make it, to humanize it, because it's, at the end of the day, I mean, there's nothing more human than dying.
Yes. Yeah. What else makes more, that's really the thing that, to me, that defines life. And it's like, it defines it. It's like,
Right.
if it's going to end, it's got, I don't know. I never know how to put that into words, but
Yeah, it's the end of the print, right? It's the open and closed parentheses of the whole life, right? I mean, birth and death. And so,
yeah.
and then all you have in between that is the journey of living. And so when you're not afraid of the end part, like none of us are afraid of the birth part, right? Like we're all excited about birth, and it's like, oh, a new baby and all of that. But then it comes to the end of life. And to me, I do find it exciting. I mean, I've got a couple of hospice patients right now that I mean, they're excited. We have conversations about, they can't wait to get to the other side and connect with their loved ones. And it's so just refreshing and amazing to me that they're so able and willing to talk about it and not be afraid of it, you know? And when you have that flexibility, it just, it's so, it's just amazing. It makes it fun.
It's a whole shift. I do like, you know, having empathy for that situation. I do know that for myself and many I've talked to, the fear is the how, like, because with birth, you know, there's a 9-month period, but with death, you have no schedule, you have no timeline. You don't know how much pain, suffering, you don't know how it's going to go down. And so I think it's that fear of unknown. And I definitely have it. When I get real with it, it's like, that is a serious fear. And it's I think what makes it harder, our hospice director, Hospice Maui, he often tells a story of how it's not what you brought up was, you said birth, death. And I like that you did that, because I was talking life, death, but really, you know, birth marks the beginning of this life as Laura or as Lisa, and then death marks the end. But really life, you know, if you're talking about life in a bigger sense, it's not really beginning or ending. So
Right.
those terms, you know, it's, yeah, they're both punctuations, you know, within a
Yes.
whole everything.
Yeah, that's really true. And you're absolutely right about, the ending is, you know, unknown for everybody, what the experience is going to be. And yeah, and getting real with it. I just did a podcast actually about finding out one of my son's best friends was killed. Just walking along the street, a drunk driver came and took him out, 23-year-old young man who, you know, had just all of this potential in his life. And wow, it just, I mean, here I deal with death all the time. I work with my hospice patients. I do that, and it just completely took me up short when it came so close to home, and helping my son just talk about it and deal with it. You know, it's a different experience. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's as kind of as, the word exciting isn't the right word really, but, you know, as dynamic as death can be, it can also, you know, it is, when it comes so close and personal, it's crushing.
It is. It's like a bomb going off
Yeah,
in your existence. Yeah.
exactly. Well, do you happen to have any stories that come to mind about work you've done that just kind of, I don't know, just shed some light on the whole, I guess, what kind of work you do, and some, you know, something along those lines?
Yeah, boy. By far, whenever people ask me, you know, like if I were to pinpoint important things I've done in my life, it's the people that I've been with when they took their last breath. It's just, which story do I tell? You know, it's like, gosh, they're all just so orchestrated. And I guess I'll talk about Ed. He was my 88-year-old neighbor who was kind of a cowboy type of guy. He just, when I look back on his death, it was almost like he had it like it was like a storybook. Like like each time someone would come, like the perfect timing with everything, down to the actual moment that he took his last breath. It was almost like perfection. And you can't see that or know that when you're in it, because you're dealing with okay, he just unconsciously pulled the catheter out. So because he did it in his sleep. So now I got to get up and, you know, either call the nurse, get some help. You know, you're dealing with all these things. And then you're dealing with a teenage daughter who's coming over and wants to feed her grandpa, but he's like, I can't eat right now. It's way too uncomfortable. And you know, you're dealing with the emotions of her saying goodbye and upset that she can't feed her grandpa still. You're trying to keep it silent, like he wants it. You know, there's just so many different tasks to be done. And then there's all these long moments of silence and doing nothing. And we talk a lot about the art of doing nothing. When you're doing the death work and sitting with someone who's dying, there's a lot of that. So it could be super high paced. You got to get this done, help. And then you're just sitting being for a long time.
Right.
And so with him, I mean, I didn't know who would be there at the end. He was really close with his son-in-law. He had 3 sons all living on the property where I was caring for him. And he was close with his son-in-law, who was also on the property. But at his very last moment, which it's always kind of like, oh, like when it happens, even though there's a huge buildup, it's always kind of like, oh, whoa, okay, it's now. Um, when it was finally his moment, here comes his son-in-law right then. And it was almost like that was sanctioned, like for him to be there with Ed and with me. And he's there grabbing his hand, like something like, you go for it, old boy, or something. I don't know, like a total like cowboy, like you got this. And he did. I mean, he just had it. He was completely coherent the whole time throughout his death. Funny sense of humor. Could talk about his pain that he had. Could talk about the glories in his life. He could cry. He was just very, very present and alive with what was happening, and the fact that he was going and he was saying goodbye. And that was, he was an angel in my life. To see that, what a death like that could be.
Wow.
Really special.
That's amazing. I love it. And I love that you say, you know, like a storybook that you can't really see when you're in it, but, you know, looking back, how it just was all orchestrated and how it unfolded so beautifully. And it reminds me of when my mom died. She was in Kauai on a month vacation there. And she actually called me and she said, "Oh, I'm so sad. We're going home tomorrow. I don't want to leave Kauai. I love it here so much." And within an hour or so of that time, she had a stroke and ended up in the hospital. And then I flew out, and then my brother flew out, and she was pretty much unconscious the whole time. But it was crazy. My brother and I were sitting in the waiting room talking about all the different scenarios that might happen. And every time that we would say, well, you know, she might need somebody to help, you know, feed her or something, the elevator doors would open and a little vignette would come out with that exact scenario. Somebody pushing somebody in you know, a wheelchair, and they had the food with them and kind of like trying to feed them as they were. And I was like, what is happening? And I mean, it like happened 3 or 4 times, and we just started laughing. We're like, oh my gosh, this is the universe showing us all these different vignettes that might happen. And then anyway, but it was just totally orchestrated. And like you said, she took her last breath right after we had all gone to lunch and came back, and we had said, let's put her on hospice. And then we all just stood around her and took her last breath. I mean, it couldn't have been orchestrated any more beautifully. So I love it when things like that unfold like that.
Yeah, and it's not always. I do feel like my purpose here, for some reason, the deaths that I've been exposed to and the people that I'm involved with, there's like some sort of soul agreement between us. And I know that not all deaths are perfect like that, or you know, people aren't always that are present, the ones who are dying, the family members. Not everybody's open to it happening. You know, there's a lot of resistance. So I know it doesn't always happen that way, but I definitely think one of my purposes and missions in the life is to remind people that it's a possibility. It doesn't have to be horrid. There's going to be some deaths that are difficult and
Yes.
and pretty rocky, and there's going to be moments throughout, even though we see that orchestration afterwards, there's going to be moments throughout that feel very hellish. But it's kind of just my role here is kind of like a transition peacemaker, like, hey, make peace with this chaos, you know, even though it looks like chaos, there's a much bigger thing happening here. It's like a window into another world.
Yes. Wow. I love that. In fact, I want to pull cards on that because I think that's so powerful. What you just talked about is, you know, the orchestration of death, and, you know, and yeah, they're not all these picture book stories, you know, that we want them to be by any means, of course. But I'm just getting the feeling like, let's ask spirit about, you know, why that is, or, you know, what people can do to have kind of a more, I don't know, a good death, right? Isn't that what we call it? Like, we want everyone to have a good death. Well, the first card is essence. And so a lot of times people, if they are having a difficult death, it's because they're really not in their essence. I mean, you know, people are trying to push them to do things maybe they, you know, not the way that they wanted them to be. It's like, I feel like what I'm getting is that in order to allow a good death to unfold, you need to allow the essence to come through and to not try to control it. And what I've noticed is that when there's a lot of control from the outside forces, it kind of makes the whole universe ideal wonky, right? Because they're trying to change what is.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
essence isn't being allowed to kind of unfold.
Yeah,
So and then the action is energy, and again, just allowing the energy to just flow naturally the way it wants to flow, and not to try to again, they're showing me like people trying to make the river go a certain direction when it's, not meant to go that way. And I think, like you said, I have a patient right now who, she doesn't want to eat, but her family members keep pushing food on her. And so it
mhm.
makes it difficult when the patient is saying, no, I don't want food. And yet the family members are really pushing it. Right. So to me, that's pushing against the river. It's pushing against what the essence of this person is asking for. And
Yeah,
that's when you set yourself up for discord when you're not allowing the patient to really lead the way and follow that. Do you feel
yeah.
the same way?
And I think for so many that the food equals love, and you've cared for them as they've grown ill over they've probably given them food to make them feel better for many months, if not years, not the whole life. So it's a tough one to let go of, because it's always been your way of caring for that person. And it's like, well, if I can't do that, what do I do? And so many times when someone's dying, do nothing. And that's a really hard one to accept in our culture, because we're like such a go do
Yeah.
culture. It's really hard for people to accept that, wait, nothing, like just be present with them and is helping, really.
Right.
Like,
Well, and it's so funny because, yeah, that's the outcome card, is purification, which is just literally like just letting all of that go and just letting it be, natural and pure, and not like, try to bring in all of this other stuff. Just being present and available is key
yeah,
to, allowing the good death to unfold. So
yeah, cool, yeah.
interesting.
uh,
Wow.
the essence one, my friend and I, we talk a lot about this stuff in ways that like, what are some of the qualities of being able to serve when someone's dying. And one of them is taking a look. What I always remember is taking a look at someone when they're experiencing a lot of pain, suffering, and it's hard not to take that on, and it's hard not to leave when it's time for you to go back to your life and not feel like, whoa, heavy. One thing that helps me when I'm with a person is remembering what's not dying. What is the essence? Like, what's not dying here? Because there's always something you can tap into that is, the essence of that,
Wow.
that
Yeah,
person.
like, so talk a little bit more about that. So what's not dying? So what do you mean by
So,
that?
like, if I'm sitting when I was sitting next to Ed, who's losing all abilities, can't even get up out of bed, can't even, um, you know, we can't even shift him to the bedside commode anymore to go to the bathroom. So, so it's really hard not to feel a lot of grief in that moment for this person. But if you're weighted as the person who's there to care for them, if you're weighted with that grief, you're not going to be able to really be fully present. It's not like you have to deny your grief or your sadness, but it helps in your state of reference, for what's to come after my friend goes. Is to remember, hang on a second, like, we were talking about life, death, but there's still life there. There's still the essence of this soul I've grown close to, and maybe that's the word I'm going for, is soul. It's like, an energy. You pulled energy. It's like, what is the essence and energy that can't be, there's
Right.
something there that can never, I
That's,
believe, not everybody does, but there's a divine something that is animating our bodies, that's not, it's very much alive and liberated when the
that's
body,
right.
this
I love that.
package goes. That's like, blooms.
That's for sure. Absolutely. I get it now. So yeah, because you're absolutely right. And I always talk about how when the body goes, the spirit, is now in a different realm, but still totally accessible and available. And so working on connecting and even asking them if they're coherent, what sign they're going to send, what kind of, how are they going to interact from the other side if they're open to that kind of conversation,
Yeah,
and I just, that definitely, like you said, there's always that never ending connection or essence, or soul that's going to be there for people that believe that.
Yes.
So that's awesome. Well, how can, if people want to get a hold of you, like how can they do so?
Great. I've got a presence on Facebook, just my name, Laura Miner, Miner. I've got an end of life care, Laura Miner End of Life Care. And then I've also got a website, which is Tend the Soul, which is perfect from what we just started talking about. It's called tendthesoul.com.
Fabulous. Excellent. And we will definitely have the links on the website so people can find you there too. Well, thank you, Laura, so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. And I love that our paths have crossed, and I look forward to seeing you around Maui.
I look forward to talking to you more about this. I feel like we could talk for like 3 more hours.
I know. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot more to talk about. So great.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.